This is Kobe Elsing with breaking news. Today marks the end of the Montgomery bus boycott, with the Supreme Court's ruling that segregation on public buses is unconstitutional. The boycott began on December 1st, 1955, and ended today, December 5th, 1956. It started last year when 42-year-old Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white man. After refusing to give it up, she was arrested and fined. 4 days later, the boycott began. Instead of taking the buses, African Americans have been walking, riding bikes, and carpooling for daily transportation. Martin Luther King Jr. is becoming a big name in the fight for equal rights. He was the primarily spokesman for the boycott and now influences blacks all around the country with his nonviolent protests. Now that the boycott is over, Africans have begun riding the buses again and generating revenue for the Montgomery public bus system.
Date and Getty year. Last year, 1964, segregation was ended in all public places and schools. Therefore, allowing black kids to join public school and get the proper education that the white kids have already been receiving. Ruby Bridges was the first black kid to join a white school. Ruby was escorted to and from school by U.S. Marshals. She was treated terribly by white students, and some parents even pulled their children out of the school because they didn't want their kids to be with a black student. But this started to get a tiny bit better over time. Also, this act banned employment, discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Southern members of Congress were not in favor of this act, and they strongly opposed it. But the act still made it through and was signed into law by John F. Kennedy's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yesterday, the U.S. lost a very important civil rights movement leader. On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was standing on the balcony of his hotel room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, when a sniper shot him in the neck. He was rushed to the St. Joseph's Hospital but died within an hour of getting there. MLK was 39 years old. It is still unknown who killed King. Throughout the years of being a civil rights leader, he had many accomplishments. He led 200,000 people to the Lincoln Memorial and gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. He was also awarded a Nobel Peace Prize and led many more peaceful protests to fight for the freedom of African Americans. Only time will tell how impactful he was to taking strides to rights for African Americans.
One year ago today, Willie O'Ree retired from playing hockey. At the age of 23, he made his career debut as the first African American in the National Hockey Association. He was picked up by the Boston Bruins as an emergency fill-in after a player was injured. He played the majority of his career in the WHL, playing with the Los Angeles Blades and the San Diego Gulls. His career concluded with a total of 408 goals and 409 assists. He says that the players and fans in the American League are much more racist and discriminate than those in Canada.
Today, there was a political rally for the civil rights of African Americans. More than 200,000 black and white Americans gathered today in front of the Washington Memorial. It was named the Great March. People gathered there to protest rights and freedoms of blacks and their jobs in the post-war years that had been facing discrimination since the Civil War. They had songs, speeches, and prayers. This was led by clergymen, civil rights leaders, politicians, and entertainers. Martin Luther King had one of his best speeches today, saying his I Have a Dream speech. That electrified the crowd. It seems that this rally may have picked up steam in the civil rights movement.
Go.
10 years ago, Harry S. Truman issued an executive order that desegregated the military by allowing all races to serve, but it will take 3 years until they can start training, even though they will end up serving in mostly non-combat roles. The ones that served in actual combat showed great courage and bravery under fire. Some have described this act as the pinnacle of the Truman Civil Rights Program and the climax of the struggle for racial equality. The Army's last segregated units were finally disbanded in 1954.